For 40 years, scientists said the walls of Jericho never fell because the city barely existed. Then someone looked at the original data and found a mistake that changed everything. Tel Es Sultan, the ancient dirt mound rising from the Jordan Valley, serves as the physical stage for this decades-long dispute. Between 1952 and 1958, British archaeologist Dame Kathleen Kenyon directed a series of highly systematic excavations at the site. Using the Wheeler-Kenyon stratigraphic method, a precise approach that analyzed soil layers and vertical trench walls, rather than just broad horizontal spaces, she set out to bring modern scientific rigor to a field previously dominated by theological assumptions. Her team sliced trenches into the mound, exposing a complex sequence of occupational levels spanning thousands of years. They documented successive civilizations built one on top of the other, preserving a physical record of human history in the region. The culmination of her field research was synthesized and published posthumously in 1981 in the monumental volume, Excavations at Jericho, Volume 3, The Architecture and Stratigraphy of the Tell. In this highly detailed report, Kenyon presented her definitive chronological assessment of the uppermost Bronze Age layers, designated as City 4. Her conclusion was clear and seemingly final. The fortified Middle Bronze Age city had been completely destroyed by fire around 1550 BCE. Following this destruction, the site lay virtually abandoned. Kenyon asserted that during the Late Bronze Age, specifically around 1400 BCE, the traditional time frame associated with the biblical accounts of Joshua, there was no active city at Tel Es Sultan, nor were there any defensive walls to be thrown down. This academic assessment quickly became the unassailable foundation for Near Eastern historical studies. For 40 years, Kenyon's rigorous stratigraphic profiles and extensive catalog of artifacts served as the ultimate reference point. Her conclusions bypassed active debate, transforming a single archaeological campaign's interpretation into an established historical fact that reshaped textbooks, university syllabi, and the broader understanding of ancient Levantine history. Kenyon's stratigraphic methodology, developed alongside Mortimer Wheeler, represented the peak of mid-20th century field archaeology. By focusing on vertical soil profiles rather than sweeping horizontal exposures, her technique offered a level of spatial control that older excavations could not match. This methodological superiority gave her conclusions an almost unassailable authority. To question her chronological assessments on Jericho was to question the very validity of modern, scientific archaeological practice. The assertion that Tel Es Sultan lay abandoned during the Late Bronze Age bypassed the normal cycles of peer critique, quickly integrating itself into academic literature as settled history. For nearly 40 years, standard reference works, university textbooks, popular documentaries, and peer-reviewed journals reproduced her timeline without independent verification of her primary field records. The phrase, "the myth of Jericho," became standard academic shorthand, widely accepted before the underlying raw data was ever systematically rechecked. This rapid transition from field hypothesis to absolute orthodoxy was driven by a powerful social dynamic within academia. Because Kenyon was widely recognized as one of the world's leading field archaeologists, her extensive archives, including her daily field notebooks, soil profiles, and complex ceramic distribution tables, remained unstudied in collections for decades. Scholars in related disciplines, such as biblical studies and ancient Near Eastern history, accepted her stratigraphic conclusions on faith, assuming that the primary physical material had been completely and faultlessly analyzed. The interpretation hardened into an unquestioned consensus. This happened because the excavator's formidable reputation made any alternative seem methodologically backward, leaving the physical evidence unexamined by independent eyes. In 1990, an American archaeologist named Bryant Wood published a systematic reanalysis of Kathleen Kenyon's field data in the journal Biblical Archaeology Review. Wood did not approach the problem as a theological debate or an effort to validate religious texts. Instead, he framed the entire dispute as a technical scientific disagreement centered on archaeological methodology, specifically how Kenyon had classified and sequenced the pottery. Wood spent years examining the raw, unpublished excavation records kept in university archives, including Kenyon's daily field notebooks and ceramic distribution tables. His investigation focused on a specific diagnostic marker, Cypriot bichrome pottery. This distinctive painted imported ware is widely recognized as an indicator of late Bronze Age trade networks across the Mediterranean. Wood argued that Kenyon had misclassified these imported sherds as local Middle Bronze Age vessels. By correcting this diagnostic classification, Wood asserted that a foundational error had slipped into the established pottery sequence, meaning the final phase of the fortified city actually extended decades past the timeline Kenyon had calculated. This technical challenge reopened a file that the academic community had considered closed for 40 years. Cypriot bichrome ware, distinguished by its white slip decorated with black-on-red painted motifs, originated on the island of Cyprus and served as a primary diagnostic marker for late Bronze Age trade across the eastern Mediterranean. Because Kenyon found none of this imported pottery in her trenches, she concluded that Jericho could not have been occupied during this period. Her chronological reconstruction of the site's abandonment rested on this negative evidence. Wood, however, exposed a fundamental flaw in this archaeological logic. Cypriot bichrome was a luxury import, highly concentrated in wealthy coastal trading hubs and elite tombs. Inland, provincial towns like Jericho, situated in the Jordan Valley, had little access to such high-status goods. Expecting to find rare Cypriot imports in a modest agricultural settlement was a methodological misstep. The absence of this pottery reflected Jericho's geographic isolation and economic reality, rather than a lack of population. By relying on the absence of a luxury trade item to date an inland site, Kenyon had mistaken a lack of wealth for a lack of people, creating an artificial chronological gap based on what was missing rather than what was actually in the ground. Removing the assumption that a lack of imported pottery proved the site was abandoned altered the reading of Tel es Sultan. Without the artificial barrier of the missing Cypriot luxury goods, the local pottery found within the ashes of City 4 showed active habitation. The utility vessels, the everyday cooking pots, storage jars, and household bowls left in the ruins matched ceramic designs from other southern Levantine sites dating directly to the late Bronze I period. This corrected sequence showed that the fortified city did not perish in 1550 BCE. Instead, the final phase of City 4 extended decades further, placing its destruction around 1400 BCE. The timeline of Jericho, long presented in academic textbooks as a settled issue, was suddenly open. By resolving this chronological error, the adjusted timeline of the city's final days now matched the physical evidence of fire and collapse left in the soil. The site was no longer empty during the disputed period, and the long-held academic certainty began to break down on chronological grounds alone. During his excavations from 1930 to 1936, English archaeologist John Garstang uncovered a physical anomaly that defied standard military expectations of the ancient world. At the base of the city mound, Garstang documented the remnants of a massive mud brick wall that had collapsed outward, tumbling down the slope of the hill. In ancient warfare, walls did not typically fall this way. Standard siege operations, whether involving battering rams, undermining, or heavy physical assault from the outside, exerted inward pressure. Consequently, defensive structures almost always collapsed toward the interior of the city. Yet, across a wide section of Jericho's perimeter, the heavy mud bricks lay piled in the opposite direction, creating a natural ramp of debris leading directly up to the settlement. This outward failure indicates a sudden, catastrophic structural collapse. The base of the wall gave way rapidly, forcing the massive upper structure to topple down the mound. Directly associated with this fallen brickwork, Garstang's team recorded a thick layer of black ash, charcoal, and heavily burned debris. This intense burn horizon sat directly on and around the collapsed bricks, indicating that a massive conflagration engulfed the city in the immediate aftermath of the collapse. With the chronology of City 4 now open to re-examination, Garstang's older field records take on a new physical significance. The evidence he preserved in his notebooks describes a fortified city that experienced a sudden, violent destruction. The physical ruins preserve the signature of an abrupt collapse, where the very defenses meant to keep invaders out fell outward down the slope. Inside the ash layer of City 4, excavators recovered large quantities of undisturbed, carbonized grain, still sitting in storage jars. In the ancient Near East, grain served as a primary commodity and a major source of wealth, often functioning as a form of currency. When an army besieged and conquered a city, these grain stores were typically the first items looted to feed the victorious troops and replenish their own kingdoms. Leaving valuable food supplies behind contradicts standard military behavior. This undisturbed material provides clear behavioral evidence. A population gradually abandoning a city over months or years does not leave its food supply behind. They consume their stores as resources dwindle. The presence of full jars indicates that the end of City 4 was sudden, preventing both the inhabitants from eating their provisions and the conquerors from carrying them away. The state of the grain also pinpoints the timing of the destruction. The jars were full, indicating the fire occurred shortly after the spring harvest when storage bins were at peak capacity. This physical pattern mirrors a specific narrative detail in the biblical text. The book of Joshua describes a sacred ban, or harem, which prohibited the conquering Israelites from taking plunder from Jericho, commanding instead that the city and its contents be destroyed by fire. While this religious text cannot serve as archaeological proof, the physical evidence of unlooted burned grain shows that the historical destruction of City 4 followed this exact, highly irregular pattern of warfare. The victors burned the city's most valuable asset in place. In 1995, a scientific team led by Hendrik Bruins and Johannes van der Plicht, affiliated with the University of Toronto, subjected these carbonized grain samples to high-precision carbon-14 testing. They utilized accelerator mass spectrometry to analyze the short-lived seeds rather than structural charcoal. In radiocarbon dating, multi-year wood samples can suffer from the old wood effect, reflecting when a tree grew rather than when it died in a fire. Cereal grains, however, grow and harvest in a single season, offering an accurate snapshot of the exact year of the destruction. The laboratory measurements produced a weighted average that, when calibrated, centered near 1410 BCE, with an uncertainty window of plus or minus 40 years. This chronometric range provides an independent, absolute date for the fiery collapse of City 4. By anchoring the destruction layer to the early 15th century BCE, the physics of radioactive decay bypassed the subjective debates of ceramic styling. The scientific data placed the fall of the city's defenses directly within the disputed Late Bronze Age timeline, challenging the mid-20th century consensus with measurable empirical proof. The debate at Tel Es Sultan serves in academic graduate programs as a clear case study in how scientific consensus can freeze when foundational data is not actively re-examined. For decades, the initial interpretations of Jericho's layers were accepted on authority, demonstrating how easily an academic model can persist unchallenged. Today, a broader chronological reassessment is reshaping Southern Levantine archaeology. A 2022 review in the Journal of Archaeological Science Reports documents numerous Bronze Age sites where older established timelines are being systematically revised. This reassessment relies on two primary drivers: high-precision accelerator mass spectrometry radiocarbon dating of short-lived organic samples, and refined ceramic analysis that corrects legacy classification errors. This systemic shift moves the discussion beyond a single disputed mound. It illustrates how the discipline corrects itself by subjecting legacy archives to modern, independent testing. By separating raw, physical evidence from the historic interpretations built on top of it, researchers are establishing a more precise, data-driven timeline for the ancient Near East, proving that even the most deeply entrenched consensus must remain open to scientific revision. Regional diplomatic records from the 14th century BCE provide the wider political context for this period. The Egyptian Amarna letters, dating between 1350 and 1330 BCE, contain urgent pleas from Canaanite rulers, asking for military assistance against groups called the Habiru. Some historians link this term to the early Hebrew populations entering the highlands, though others view it as a broad social class rather than a specific ethnic group. A 2020 genetic study published in the journal Cell also found direct genetic continuity between Bronze Age Levantine populations and modern Lebanese and Palestinian groups, suggesting a cultural transition rather than total population replacement. While these records map the shifting regional environment, they remain circumstantial, offering no direct physical proof of the destruction at Jericho itself. The material evidence at Tel es Sultan supports a specific, bounded conclusion. Around 1400 BCE, a fortified city met a violent end. Its defensive walls collapsed outward, and an intense fire consumed the settlement, leaving large stores of harvested grain untouched. Geophysicist Amos Nur has suggested that tectonic activity along the Jordan Rift Valley could have initiated this structural failure, presenting a natural mechanism that fits alongside both the physical ruins and the historical texts. But here, the empirical data stops. Archaeology cannot identify the specific military forces outside the gates, nor can it validate supernatural claims. The decades of debate over Jericho expose the gap between raw, objective physical evidence and the rigid academic interpretations that can obscure it. Today, the dust of Tel es Sultan reminds us that consensus is not the same as truth. While physical ruins remain silent, the interpretations we build upon them are always vulnerable to new light. As advanced technology reevaluates the past, our greatest challenge is keeping an open mind. What other historical certainty is waiting to be rewritten? Share your thoughts below.